Thank you all for having me out to visit with you at the Exchange Club. Again, my name is Sheree Martin, and I'm a native of Russellville, Alabama. I was born there, grew up there, went to high school, all my schooling in Russellville, and then my family actually, my mom inherited some land just in Colbert County when I was a child, and so I grew up just on the Colbert County side of the Franklin line, even though I went to the Russellville school system. So I spent the first 17 and a half years of my life there, and then I headed off to Tuscaloosa for college and law school, and I ended up working there for a long time. I did practice law here in Florence for a couple of years, doing tax and business law, and I had the great fortune when I was in Tuscaloosa. One of my law partners, Sidney Cook, was a member of the Exchange Club, or is a member, I assume he's still a member, of the Exchange Club in Tuscaloosa. So periodically I would attend a lunch meeting with him, and so I always had a great opportunity to get acquainted with some of the folks in the Exchange Club there, and I know you guys and ladies do wonderful work, and it's an honor to be able to speak to you here today. And I am a faculty member at Samford University in Birmingham. I'm in the Journalism and Mass Communication department. I teach classes related to communication, writing, social media for strategic business purposes, page layout and design, and media law. Those are kind of the areas that I teach the most. What I'm going to be talking about today, though, is the proposal by Governor Bentley and others to explore the development of the Hartselle Sandstone here in North Alabama. It actually extends all the way down into the Black Warrior River Basin. And I understand that I'm sort of here as a substitute for Dr. Jim Latesville, who is a retired geologist, was a faculty member at UNA, and he was going to focus more on just the geology, and I think you guys all wanted to have something more of the big picture, and so that's what I'm here to speak with you about. Just briefly, when I was in college, the first 2 years that I was in college, I was a part-time office assistant with Hawkeye Oil and Gas, a couple of lawyers who had begun that business, and they were in oil and gas leasing for the purpose of packaging leases and doing some exploratory drilling oil wells. And we met those folks through their interest in my family's property over in Colbert County, which is in the Shine Springs area on the state geological maps. And so I grew up knowing that we had these things that were called tar sands, colloquially at the time, on our property. And we periodically would have geologists who would come out, and sometimes college students who were writing papers, graduate students who were writing papers. They would come out and pay a visit and do core samples and core drilling, and folks leased the land from time to time. The idea back then was there might be a way to drill for this, or at least that was the understanding that we had. I'm not sure that that was necessarily the possibility, but in those days there was not an interest expressed, at least to my family, on surface mining of oil sands. There was an interest in extracting them, and we were not opposed to that at the time. And so what I want to talk to you about today, just a few things. I'm going to briefly talk about the history of Hartselle sandstone mining, asphaltic sandstone mining in the Colbert County area of Alabama, and some of the geological records that I'm somewhat familiar with, not as a geologist but as a layperson. And then also talk about a little bit that's going on in Utah and Kentucky, what's known about those projects from a public sense. I don't have any special unique knowledge to those, and also talk about how those are different from what we have here in Northwest Alabama in the sense of the location and the residentially developed areas, and leave some time to answer some questions. But I want to present, I hope, a neutral perspective on this. I personally don't think it's going to be a good idea. I can't identify that the benefits would outweigh the detriments to those of us who live or intend to return here and live here with the quality of life we currently have. I won't say that there might not be economic benefit to some people, but I do want to present this in as neutral of a way as I can, because I'm not here to lobby for something. I'm here as an educator, and I think that if people are informed, that people will then go out and study and research and make decisions for themselves about what they think is the best thing for their families and their community. So just to briefly start out a little bit with history, Oil sands, or again, as they were known in the old days, tar sands or tar deposits, asphalt deposits, are found throughout northwest Alabama, mainly in Lawrence County, Colbert County, Franklin County, where there are what's called outcroppings, where these deposits appear on or near the surface. And so you can walk back on our farm and see the sandstone that is the asphaltic sandstone, or part of the Hartselle Sandstone Formation. Over in West Colbert County, there are a number of old abandoned quarries and actually a couple of active quarries where limestone asphaltic rock is mined, and it's used in paving. In the early part of our centuries, we had the Native American population would actually use the asphalt springs sometimes for medicinal purposes. So the presence of these deposits has been known for a long time. In the 1920s, there were companies that were actively involved in mining the asphaltic sandstone out in West Colbert County and different parts of Colbert County for road paving. And so there was a lot of historical news coverage in the old Florence Times, and there are some ads saying, what a great economic opportunity this will be. I think what happened with the timing of those projects is they were happening in the mid-1920s, and then we had, the stock market crash, and economic depression came along. There was a resurgence of interest in mining for paving purposes and some of the oil sands in the late 1940s after World War II as the road building project resumed. And there was I believe from Kentucky, but it may have been an Alabama company. Some of the details for who was doing it, I'm not as familiar with. But currently, other than some mining limestone with asphalt within the limestone for paving purposes, there hasn't been any kind of active development of the Hartselle sandstone for petroleum products ever in Alabama. And so I want to just briefly, this is a quote here from the Geological Survey of Alabama, a bulletin that was published, number 111, written by Gary D. Wilson, one of the state geologists. Characteristics and resource evaluation of the asphalt and bitumen or bitumen, depending on who you speak with, deposits of northern Alabama. And this was published in 1987, which is, as I understand it, the most recent scientific geological analysis that's been done. There's been more core drilling since that time. But this report was based on the best science available at that time. The most significant asphalt deposits in the outcrop region occur in the Pride Mountain Formation and overlaying Hartselle sandstone. Past commercial developments have been for road construction materials, and these have been conducted primarily in the Pride Mountain Formation located in West Colbert County. That's out near Cherokee, Marjoram area, out there in Barton. The widespread Hartselle sandstone, however, contains the greatest reserves of petroleum, and these rocks are considered to have the best potential for future oil extraction operations. And he goes on to talk about the different terminology that's been used. These are commonly referred to, he says, as rock, asphalt, tar sands, heavy oil sands, and bitumen deposits, or bitumen deposits. Those have been historically used interchangeably. There's been a shift to the more, I guess you could say, benign-sounding oil sands terminology in recent years. But historically, folks talked about these as tar sands because that was the colloquial understanding. It's not exactly the same chemical composition, I understand, as tar, but that's the term that's been used. And continuing now, reading from the report, as of 1987, only relatively small pilot recovery projects have been undertaken within the United States. And as of this time, there had been no mining of the asphalt for paving conducted since 1978. So some of the limestone paving product companies may still be, because they're operating out in West Cherokee area, they may be extracting some of that limestone-based asphalt rock, but not the Hartselle sandstone for petroleum production. So you've probably all heard and seen pictures of the Canadian oil sands and the vast projects that are there. I'm not here to talk about those. It's a different environment, a different operation. We won't get into whether it's good or bad, but it's happening, and there are consequences to that for good or bad. But the the type of oil sands they have in Canada are somewhat different geologically speaking than in Alabama. In Canada, they're considered water wet, which means there's a molecule or so of water that's intermixed within the sand and the clay and the asphalt or the bitumen. Utah is probably the closest, and perhaps Kentucky, to what we have in Alabama, which is considered oil wet, meaning there aren't the water molecules. So it's my understanding that whatever is going to be done in Utah, Kentucky, and Alabama, because we have oil wet sandstone, we would not have these water-based tailings ponds that we would have in Canada. So there, the pictures are ugly, and again, I don't really want to focus on Canada because I want to focus on what's happening here in the United States right now. And so a few years ago, approximately maybe 10 years ago, there was an initiative in Utah which has the largest reserves of the oil sands in the United States. Kentucky and Alabama are in second and third place, respectively. And so there's a company now called U.S. Oil Sands, and they are permitted to actually begin commercial production of a very small-scale facility in the PR Springs area of Utah. It took them about 10 years to go from a feasibility study and testing to actually getting the permits that they need to begin those operations. So a 10-year process of considering the environmental impact and the technological developments and innovations that they are going to be using. They have on their website, which you can look it up, videos of their production processes, details about the patented solvents that they're going to use to extract the oil from the sandstone, and the remediation procedures that they're going to follow. The one thing that it's important to keep in mind, though, is that in Utah, the location where they're going to be mining is, for the most part, a desert, and it's almost not populated. It's on government lands that there aren't people who live nearby. There are a few, and there are people who are very upset about the effect that this is going to have on areas from Grand Junction, Colorado, north into Utah, where they're going to be doing the mining. But again, it's a very different environment, and the state has put forth a lot of effort to review these before issuing the necessary permits. There are also some operations getting started in Kentucky, which has moved a little bit faster. There is a company called Arrakis, or I'm not sure how to pronounce that, Arrakis Petroleum, Arrakis Oil. And they started a few years ago developing projects in Logan County, Kentucky. And that company was bought out last year by Archer Petroleum, which is a Canadian oil sands company. There's also a great deal of information on the Archer Petroleum website about the processes that they're going to use. In both cases, you have to mine the sandstone from the earth through a surface mining technique, and then you have to run the sandstone through a solvent, which is supposed to be environmentally friendly, that is a closed-loop system where the solvent and the sandstone are processed, the oil is extracted from that, and the sand comes out basically clean and safe and benign. That's the technology that's being tested, and that sand would then be either returned for remediation purposes or perhaps used for commercial construction, I don't know. But there is the mining aspect to be considered, which affects the surface of the land and the folks who live nearby those mining areas. Then there's the processing facility, which extracts in a closed-loop system using these environmentally friendly technologies, and we'll assume that they are as safe as are supposed to be. And then you leave that process. Then you have two essentially end products. You have the sand that has been cleaned and separated from the oil, and you have the heavy crude oil, bituminous oil, or bitumen, that is now oil, very thick and heavy, but that can be stored and then transported to a refinery for processing into other types of petroleum products. The main thing I think that it's important to consider is essentially that all of these are somewhat experimental technologies. Obviously, Utah is much farther along, and they have done a lot of testing, so they're moving from the pilot facility process into an operational facility on a very small scale. They have several thousand acres, but they're going to be doing them in very small parcels and supposedly remediating as they go. Again, it's in a desert, different water systems, different hydrological phenomenon there going up here. Don't know quite as much about how far along Kentucky is, but it is, again, different from what we have here in Northwest Alabama. So what I want to turn now to a little bit is some of my concerns in what we have here in Northwest Alabama, which, although the prime locations that are being acquired by the company, the main company, and there are some other companies who've acquired mineral interests either through leases or purchases. These are, yes, they're rural, but there are people who live all around. And so there are lots of residences there. And the mining process I want you to think about this really in 4 steps. There's the mining that will remove the sandstone from the earth, and then that product will be transported to a processing facility, potentially in Spring Valley or in Wolf Springs over in Lawrence County, maybe both. We don't know where they plan to put the processing facility. And then there will be the process, which is supposed to be environmentally friendly, closed-loop system that results in the heavy crude oil and the sand that would then be, I guess, returned to the earth for remediation purposes. So we have mining, we have processing. And then once we have the separation, we have a heavy crude oil that's going to have to be stored somewhere in the shoals area in anticipation of transport out of the shoals by either train, by rail, or truck, potentially barge on the Tennessee River, of this heavy oil. I'm not sure which refinery, if it would be shipped down to Louisiana or if it would go to a refinery, even like Hunt refining in Tuscaloosa. I don't know if they're capable of refining the heavy crude. That's a question I don't know the answer to. But so we have these 4 potential points of impact on our Northwest Alabama area. We have the mining, we have the processing, and we have the storage and transport. And we can't simply focus on just the environmentally friendly solvent-based extraction process, which is all I've really heard anybody talk about when I've been to events to try to learn more about it. So I've been doing this research to try to learn what is it they're going to do in Utah, what are they going to do in Kentucky, how is it like here, how is it different. I'm not anti-progress at all. I was a business lawyer and tax lawyer. I'm pro economy. But at the same time, I also believe that there's a special quality of life in Northwest Alabama because of the river, because of the artistic community, because of the farming and the agriculture that we have, the water resources that we have available to us. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the potential impacts. There's a lot of research has been done on the effect of mining, surface mining, and quarrying for a variety of purposes, not specifically for oil sands, because that has not been done in the United States in residential areas before. But there's a lot of research on surface mining for coal, for sand, for gravel, and other products on residential and non-industrial commercial property values. So if these finds are permitted and go forward, then we have to face the fact that people who live in the area or who have a business in the area are going to see 30 to 40 to 50% residential property value declines based on what has happened in areas that are close proximity to other kinds of surface mines. So that's an impact. It won't obviously affect most of the folks who live north of the river because this mining isn't going to happen there. But it is something that will, my parents have built a home and a life there, and the property that's ground zero is adjacent to our property. So, I don't really look forward to seeing, my parents lose half the value of their home. They'll never be able to sell it. Even under the best of circumstances, there will be a lot of traffic, heavy trucks moving up and down the road. And it's not just for my family, but it's for all of the folks who live in the areas close to that which could be mined. So that residential property value, one of the professors who does a lot of research on this is out of Auburn University, and I'm hoping that her research will be presented at an event coming up June 24th, over at the Roundhouse in Tuscumbia, the State Extension Service is doing an educational program there with the scientists from the state oil and gas board will be there, and the researchers from Auburn with the Extension Service will be there. Another impact that is very serious, especially for the long-term viability of North Alabama as a farming mecca, and with the droughts in California and the challenges with potential aquifer depletion in the Midwest, Alabama is sitting on an opportunity to really become one of the leading agricultural farming states again. We have the water, we have the land, and we have the climate to do this. But if we remove the soil and separate it, we're going to destroy the topsoil. Now, in good faith, they're supposed to and say they will remediate this land and plant environmentally friendly plants to bring it back. And I don't doubt that they have good intentions, but it takes 100 years for nature to create 1 to 2 inches of topsoil. That's not my number, that's numbers from the scientists who are soil scientists. So if we destroy the topsoil on thousands of acres, potentially, even more than tens of thousands, but in the near term, a couple thousand acres of land, what is that going to do for the economic opportunity to expand our farming business here in Alabama? Another huge impact, especially for Tuscumbia and folks in Talbot County, is that the aquifers that feed the water system that provides the drinking water and the waters that flow into the Tennessee River are primarily situated in the Spring Valley area coming off the mountain where they have acquired this property. So they're going to be doing the mining on top of the aquifers that feed this big stream in Tuscumbia and numerous wells for home and agricultural purposes. Who knows what the impacts will be for that? But anytime that you disturb the soil, there's an opportunity for inert elements to be released in ways that do not happen when rainwater is filtering through soil that's protected by tree roots and other vegetation and the various levels of the sandstone that exists. But once we start separating that and we're extracting those things, we're changing the dynamics in ways that have not ever been done in a residential area in the United States. So I don't know that it's a good idea to experiment on a big scale with this technology until we know for sure what the impacts will be. And so that's why I think it's important to have have studies done about how is the water flow through the aquifer going to be affected by potential mining activities. In terms of the processing and storage facilities, there's opportunity for leaks and spills of the crude oil that will be there. There's also opportunities for escape, of different types of elements that can be harmful if you breathe them. The dust that will come about from increased mining because of vegetation. We don't see much dust today because of the rain we've been having lately, but think about some of those summers where it's been hot and dry for weeks and weeks and weeks. And so we have this exposed land sitting there waiting to be mined or have been mined. It's going to stir up a lot of silica as well as other potential particulate matter contaminants that can cause health people with breathing, cause health problems for people who have asthma and other breathing problems. So those are some of the concerns I have. And, the other factor, as I mentioned previously, the traffic from the mining areas to the processing facilities. We have a lot of cyclists in the Shoals area who do long century rides and half-century rides on their bicycles out into this area of Talbot County. And they're not going to be able to do that in an enjoyable way if there's a constant convoy of heavy dump trucks on the road. There's also, though, going to be the increased traffic demands due to transporting the heavy oil either by rail or by truck, probably down Highway 72. I liken it, if you've ever driven out Highway 78 up into Memphis over into West Memphis on Interstate 40, that is not a very pleasant drive. I'm not saying that it will turn into that tomorrow in the Shoals area, but we will see increased heavy truck traffic. And if this goes forward and accelerates at the level that some people claim that we could build these facilities, then it would forever change the quality of life, certainly in Culver County. And I think of Culver because I know a little bit less about Walnut because I'm with the native. So what I think is important to consider, if we have water contamination, what is that going to do to the tourism industry that we have on the Tennessee River? What is it going to do to the opportunity to bring in bass permits, fishing, sport fishing, recreational fishing? If we have a heavy asphalt fragrance in our air every day, what is that going to do for golf and the opportunity to the golf there? It's going to change the landscape. And people, I guess, have to make a decision, is that the kind of community they want to have, where we have heavy industry that's going to be here for 10 or 15, 20 years, perhaps if oil prices stay the same? Or do we want to encourage the 21st century economy that is more akin to the creative economy, the boom that's happening elsewhere? We need energy. We need to be energy independent. But I think there are ways that we can do it that are safer, more environmentally friendly. So I encourage you to think seriously about the entire process and the what if, because once it starts, then it won't be stopped. It will just be a matter of the permitting process going through. So where are we today? It's not going to start tomorrow. The company has already acquired several thousand acres of land. You've probably read about that in the Times Daily. There are other companies that have not been mentioned in those articles that are leasing and buying up land and mineral rights. So it's happening. We have probably, potentially well over 10,000 acres that could be subject to this at some point in the near future, if not more. And there's a lot of acreage further south of Franklin County. As you go south, there's an opportunity for this to be developed through underground recovery methods. The gas and oil prices, as I understand it, don't justify that development yet. So we're focusing more on the surface mining aspect of this. But the state legislature last year in May passed a law that says the state oil and gas board is given the authority to regulate the permits for this. And they've been instructed to draft regulations to permit these mines for the extraction of bitumen from oil sands. So that process is currently happening. Don't know exactly where the State Oil and Gas Board is in the regulation process in terms of writing the regulations. There will be a period of time that the public can comment on these regulations once they are published, which could come this summer, could come in September, early fall, but at some point this calendar year, we will likely have proposed regulations